is my temporary permissions process that I created for my work, and I will go through why and how, what I've done. Feel free to ask any questions, and we should have time at the end for more questions on just pretty much anything. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm Sharon. I've put in here my email and my GitHub. I have a contact page at the end that I'll leave up for a little bit so that you can actually get that at that time. A little bit about me for those of you who don't know me. I used to teach writing, first high school and then college. I was your Comp 1, Comp 2 research papers professor, and I was adjunct and went through difficult divorce and needed a full-time job. So I was out trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, scrolling through Twitter at 2 in the morning, as you do, and I saw something about LaunchCode. And so I signed up and off to the races. So I ended up in the very first SQL cohort at LaunchCode. And then after at the time it was a year-long class. If you have questions about LaunchCode, feel free to ask me after I finish the presentation. The time it was a year-long class, I got a great job out of it. I went back as a TA, and then my mentor was Kathy Kellenberger, who's a Microsoft MVP and an awesome person, and she asked me if I would be willing to come back and teach the class for her, and that was a huge honor for me. So I'm very proud of that. I love teaching LaunchCode, and that's what I do in addition to my day job as a DBA at NISA. Let's see. I am passionate about database security, and I know most people hear database security. I don't know why. Cybersecurity sounds really cool. Everybody wants to know more about cybersecurity, but if you say database security, everybody's brains just melt and turn off. I don't know why. So I consider it my passion, my calling to evangelize database security. So here we go. The expectations for tonight, it's not too in the weeds, but not introductory either. That's basically what I found when doing research on various database security topics or things I need to know for work. There's not a lot out there in the middle. So it's either really deeply in the weeds or it's really basic. And so I figure I will take everybody along on my journey as I learn more database security. So that's kind of my expectations of the class, not too in the weeds, but not super basic either. I'm assuming that you have a basic knowledge of how permissions work. Whether it's a login or a user, a role or secureable, but I will be kind of doing a real short definitions of those as we go along, but I'm not getting into that very deep at all. One of the main security in general principles is called the principle of least privilege. What this is that you give people access only to what they need to do their job for the length of time that they need it. So it has kind of two principles in there, or two components to that principle. So principle of least privilege is all over. You hear that's even a cybersecurity thing. So it's a little sexier, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so securables, SQL Server securables, and I will use this word tonight. Securables just means that we can apply or deny permissions on a specific object. It's a securable. So whether it's a table or a view or stored procedure or even a schema, we can apply those very granularly, which I encourage everyone to think in terms of doing. Temporary. If somebody is troubleshooting something and needs permissions for something, and then you end up just granting those permissions and they have them forevermore. That is not the most secure way to do it. So we are going to show you how to not do that. Okay. When I first started working at my company, almost 7 years now, I was the new DBA, so I was the one granting permissions. A ticket would come in, I'd get all the approvals, and then I would grant the permissions. Every so often, most of the permissions were database wide. So read on a whole database or execute on a whole database like that. And again, once you grant those permissions, they're there forever. We still have legacy permissions. I'm always trying to root up. So every so often, somebody would say, the ticket would say, I need this for 1 month or 2 weeks. So I would dutifully write it down on a Post-it note and stick it to my monitor. That is my first process, my first version of my Post-its temporary permissions process. So these are not real for work Post-its. I would never do that, but thought it would be fun. Obviously, some of the issues with Post-its as your process for temporary permissions, the Post-its kind of fall off. They end up on the floor. Or because you have them there every day for who knows how long, you don't think to look at them anymore. They just become background noise. So let me just say, this was not the most effective method of having temporary permissions. And so, dutiful DBA I have version 2. So for version 2, instead of the Post-its, I created a table. Okay. I created a table that I could then add information in there, and I had set up the table to send me an email to remind me when I needed to take permissions off. This was much better than the Post-its. But, there was extra work that had to be done. So it was better, but it was definitely extra work. And I'll show you, this is one of my favorite pictures. I know the pictures, if you've seen me present before, they're the same, but I promise next time I'll have new ones. This is Allison swimming with a gator. So there you go. The extra work involved in my second version of my temporary permissions process. Number one, I had to grant the permissions and then enter that data into a table. So that's extra typing, boring, don't want to do it. Then when the email came to me, reminder, this permissions are expiring, I would then turn around and forward the email to the requester, to the developer who put in the request, and say, is it okay if I take this permission off, or do you need an extension? So then they would ignore me and I would take it off, and then they'd get upset, blah, blah, blah. So work 1, extra typing into the table, extra step 2, forwarding that expiration email. And then I had to, when it expired, I had to remember to go back in and actually delete the permissions. So this was better than Post-its, but extra work. So as we hired more people on the team, or newer people on the team, I realized, and I wasn't doing all the permissions anymore, I realized that if I wanted things to be more secure, the permissions more granular, instead of just read on the whole database, or even worse, DDL admin on a database, well, I was going to ask people to do more work. I needed to take away work somewhere else, right? I needed to make it as easy as possible for the DBA team and our developers to think in terms of granular permissions on a temporary basis. So that's where I started I created the process that we use now and have used for several years now. So here's my GitHub, but again, I have that on my contact page that I will leave up at the end as I take questions. So you can write that down. The GitHub has all of the stored procedures, tables, all of that in there so that you can easily on your own replicate the process that I have. Okay, so we're going to go through some demos. I'm going to do 6 different demos that I'm going to have you look at. First are database roles. So a role is for the whole database. So again, that read on the whole database or, like that. Worse, DDL admin. Database, and then I'm going to give an example demo securables. So where you have select on a certain view or something like that. That is actually what we normally use at my work. Server level permissions. So if somebody wants, I'm going to say it, sysadmin. No. But other server level permissions like that or server level securables. So those are the 4 different demos. And then I have some examples of error handling that we found out the hard way, and I've added to that process because of that. Okay. Okay, so I have a database in my server called Post-it Replacement. This is just a database for this demo. It's in the real world. I have we use a different a database that's not called Post-it Replacement that has various DBA things in it on each server. So that's how we do it there. Okay, so you can look in here and you can see the users. I don't have any users. Currently, there are no users. Just me as the goddess of my server. Okay. In the demos today, I'm using SQL authenticated users, logins. But it also works for Windows authenticated. So if you are using it at work, it's nice to, it works just, it actually works easier with the Windows authenticated. Okay. So if we go in here, we have 2 tables, the temporary permissions table and the archive. So everything is driven by this temporary permissions table. So I will show you. And to be honest, when we're doing it at work, we don't do this all day long. And so because so most of the time I will go in and manually enter it into the table, but you could do it through other methods. So I'm going to show you how I would do it. So I'm going to go up, edit, go into the SQL pane. And here you could see I have my server name, my database name, my username, and this one I'm going to use Pam from the office. That's my boss. And the permission is either grant or deny. You could do either way. I don't recommend using denies because it's really easy to, they make troubleshooting more difficult if you're trying to figure something out, unless you use them all the time. Anyway, so but grant, and then this one is a role. So it's DB underscore data reader, which is a built-in role for a SQL Server. So I thought I'd show you that. Is a securable? This is not a securable. I mean, it's database wide. It's not the schema, and we don't have to input either of these in there. The requester is me. I have a field for the requester name and the email. So I have my personal email in that one. expiration date, and I have it based on a time. We normally don't put time in there. We just put a date and it will go at the end of that day. So you can see I have it set, well, it goes actually at the beginning of the day. So it goes off at midnight unless I put a different time in there. So I would put the expiration date for the day after I really want it expired. That's kind of how I do it. So you could see it has 6 hours till this one expires. It puts in there the date added, time, comment, and this is where I would put the ticket number, whatever change management system that you have. This is where I would put that in because then you can look things up if you're trying to figure something out. Added by, this defaults to who the person was that put it in. It is active. That should be false. I think. Is if I just put this in and it hasn't been applied yet, is active will show up as, nope, I'm wrong, sorry. Let me go back. Is active, if it's not active, then it's like it already expired. Is applied, it is not applied. Is server permission, this is where we'll use that later when we do our server demo. Is SQL user. Normally, you don't have to put anything in there if you're using Windows authentication, but in this case, it's a SQL authentication, and I have an extra step for troubleshooting or error handling there, so I have true for that one. Okay. Go back to our demo. Some of these in this table, and you can see, like, we'll talk about this a little bit, but some of these are defaulted in there. So I like to make it as easy as possible for the person if they are actually writing these in. If they don't need to say it's a server, it's a SQL authenticated user, because they're almost always going to be Windows, then that's a default. Defaults to Windows. Okay, or it defaults to false for that one. Added by, that's a default. The time added is a default. Any of those, as much as possible, I like to have the defaults. Just because I'm lazy. Okay. Now I'm going to go down to my jobs, and I am going to run this job manually. So at my work, I have this set to run every 5 minutes. It's very lightweight. Takes it's very lightweight, and that way I can type it into the table and then just not worry about it. It will pick it up pretty quickly. You could alternatively have it run less often to catch if you forgot to manually run it, or just manually run it. However you want to do it, whatever works for you. So I'm going to run my job to apply those temporary permissions. And let's go back up here. So now that I've done that, I'm going to refresh my users. And Pam from the office is now showing up. I don't have it creating a login if it's a SQL authenticated user, because that would include password and password, all of that. If it's a Windows authenticated user, though, it will add the login if you don't have the login. So it just makes it easier. And now I'm going to click on Pam from the office, and you are going to expect to see that she has what? She has data reader. So, yay. Okay. The next one, I have a job that is going to notify the requester, not me, as the deep, well, in this case, it is me because I'm the requester, but not me as the DBA. This goes straight to the developer, whoever it was that put in that permissions request. So let's run that job. And now, I should have planned this part better. Sorry. I'm gonna have to show you my email. And you can see my email. These permissions will be revoked by the expiration date. Please see DBAs to change the date if needed. And it has Pam from the office, the server, the database, expiration time, who requested it, what kind of permission, and the role, secureable information if that's in there. So that email goes out, and our developers know if they ignore the email, then that permission will automatically be deleted. And if they need an extension, they have to email us back. So the default is this will go away because, okay. Also, I understand that people don't actually read emails. I'm pretty bad about getting in my email first thing in the morning. It's usually pretty late in the day before I get to my emails. And I am aware that other people really don't like emails. So what I've done is I have it set to start emailing the requester 5 days ahead. You could change that if you trust your developers more or whatever, but I like to do it 5 days. So they're going to get it for 5 days. They cannot tell me they didn't see an email. Okay. So that's just kind of my thing. But again, you can set that to change however works best for you.
Sure.
Yes, sure.
Take a step back.
Yeah.
In your situation,
hmm
these permissions are specific only to prod. When
Correct.
he wants to create a database or something, they're requesting it only for prod. They have access to QA dev environment where they can get all access.
No, actually, we follow this for our test environment also. People have on their locals, they have clones that they can develop, and they have all the powers possible on their own local on the clone. But if they're using our test environment, they have more permissions than they have in prod, but they also, we do the temporary permissions there also. I mean, we have don't get me wrong, we have permissions that are long-term. But we have some restrictions. So for example, if we are using an RBAC, Active Directory group, I like an Active Directory group that is for a specific team. So the individuals go in and out of that team, depending on if they're in the team. We will grant those permissions long-term. We have a policy not to grant individuals long-term permissions. So if it's a person, like say someone is working on a project and needs more permissions than the other people on their team, and they're the only one, that's a good candidate for temporary permissions. All of our like service accounts, those are going to be long-term permissions. So not all permissions go through this, just the ones, again, the individuals or teams if it's a project and they don't need it long-term. Does that make sense? So we do it on our test environment also. Yes, they would.
Or would that be only for the application or the proxy account or?
So it's pretty rare. I shouldn't say that. We actually use them more frequently in test than in prod for that reason. The permissions are just more narrow in prod, and trying to get them even more narrow. It's my goal. Working on it. Come on. End of slide. Oh. There we go. Okay. So I showed you the email. Now we're going to update Pam from the office. Say, oh, I had the wrong date in. I'm changing the date. And I'm going to run that. Whoops. And let's try that again. Okay, so now I'm going to show you Pam from the office still in here. However, the expiration date has changed and you can tell how long this has been. Like, we wouldn't actually have 42 hours because things get deleted more quickly than that, but that's kind of just what I had in there. And you can see that is active and is applied is in there. And I'm also going to show you that the archive is empty, which makes sense because this is the first one. So, whoop. So now I'm going to run my Sprock. Yeah, or the job. Sorry, I'm going to run my job that's delete and archive temporary permissions. So here we go. Okay, the job ran successfully. And now I'll show you. Let's go over here and look. The user is still there. However, no permissions. Permissions are gone. They're deleted. I originally wrote the process to also to get rid of the user and then decided that was too risky because we do have times where we have a user that doesn't have anything but connect. And so I have a separate check that tells me, and I can go in like once a week and I can go in and delete those users. But so that is something that if you wanted to do that, you could add that in. But I actually had it in there originally and took it out because I am very risk averse. I'm a DBA, interested in database security and reliability. So a little bit risk averse on that one. Correct. Exactly. Correct. And then I go in, I have a process that looks for these over the weekend and I could go in on Monday. And if I see somebody, then I can go in and if I know that they were there. That's another discussion. So I'm trying to not say too much. Stuart.
So with all these processes already there,
Mhm.
does that mean you have that good set of owners for these servers and DBs? Where when you get a request, whom you can go to and
Yeah.
say, hey, does this person get the access or the approval process already in
Yes.
your service request?
Yes. It's a little bit more manual than I would like. I would love for ServiceNow to do this all automatically, and that is in the plans, but we're not there yet. But we do have an ownership table, and we try to keep it up to date. And the team and the person that would approve for each database, because it is database specific. It's not server specific. Okay. So she no longer has Reid. And if you look in the temporary permissions table, what would you expect to see? Nothing. She's gone. But she is still in the archive. And this is just because I am risk averse and I like to be able to look back on if somebody was in the process, but no longer there. So we don't use it enough for that archive to become too big, but you could have a clean out every so often. But I haven't had to do that yet. Okay. So that was our example of a database role that was given to Pam from Pam from the office. So now we're going to give Pam from the office insert on a table in AdventureWorks. So let's go up here to AdventureWorks. And you can see in AdventureWorks, the Pam from the office does not currently have any permissions in AdventureWorks. Okay. But we are going to give her insert on the person.person table. So very specific. I really don't like giving those right permissions to individuals. So that it would be very unlikely to happen. But let's just say here, we needed her to be able to do that to do her job. So you can see, you can do it inserting the normal insert table way. I have some of them have defaults, so I haven't included them. So let's go ahead and insert into post-it replacement. And now you can see the Pam from the office, AdventureWorks, grant, but instead of a role, we have, it's a securable person insert. Okay. Whoop, went too far. Okay, so next we're going to add an entry so that Pam from the office can grant select on the sales schema. I wanted to show you how you could do schema level securables also. That can be very handy if you have an ETL process and you'd like to put them all in one schema so that you could grant permissions on a schema level instead of individual. So, but not quite not all the way database wide. So we are going to, we are going to insert into our table so that Pam from the office has select on the person.person table. And now we go through here and you can see both of these, neither of them are applied. They're both securables. One is the sales schema, and I have this is schema just because I had to set that up differently. So the schema is a little different. When we look at the sprox later, I'll show you that. Okay. So now I'm going to run that job to apply just the same job I ran before, apply the temporary permissions, and now we're going to look in AdventureWorks. And you can see I'm going to refresh Pam from the office. And she now has a select on the sales schema and insert on the person.person table. Okay, so for the next one, so those were the two database ones. The next one we're going to do, oh man, I always forget how to get rid of that. I don't want you. Okay, the next one, I am going to grant some server level permissions. This time I am granting them to Allison Swims with Gators because of the gator picture. And so we are going to give her sysadmin for an hour, actually about an hour and a half. I actually added the time on here for those really elevated permissions that I might need to give somebody on a very temporary basis for if specifically like our infrastructure team, if they were doing an upgrade for an application and they needed that permission. And because that's not one that we give really ever. So be happy. So here we go. I am going to add that permission. Now you can see there should be 3 of these. But Allison swims with gators. There's no database name because it's a server level permission. Sysadmin. It's not a secureable. Still has the requester name, expiration date. This one has 2 hours or an hour and 40 minutes. Over here is server permission is 1. This is the one that defaults to null. And if it's a server level, we don't use server level permissions very often. So this one is not, you have to actually think it through to do a server level. Okay. And now let's go ahead and grant Allison Swims with Gators some server level securables. So what we're going to do is we are going to grant her, I really need to remember to bring a mouse. Okay. We are going to grant her alter trace. Okay. It is a server level permission that is considered a secureable. So here we go. I'm now going to insert her into the table. So now we're going to have how many in here? 4. Hopefully 4. Yes. And you can look on here and see alter trace. And it is a secureable, showing that there. 2 hours. Don't get it very long, Allison. And this one is also not applied yet. Neither of these are applied yet. So now I'm going to run my job to apply those permissions. And we're going to go down to our logins. We are going to look for Allison Swims with Gators. Pull it up. Server roles. Sysadmin, like I said, giving me a heart attack. And then securables. And I have alter trace right there. Okay. Now I wanted to show you how the delete will only delete what is expired and not the others. I just wanted to show that that actually does work that way. So we are going to change the expiration date of the sysadmin to make me happy, and that's expired, gone. So it's still going to be in our temp table. I mean, our temporary permissions table, not temp. However, it will show as already expired. So now I'm going to go run that job to delete archive temporary permissions that we've run before. And now that I've done that, how many instead of 4, how many should be in the temporary permissions table? We should still have 3 because the others 3 have not expired yet. And how many, well, and we should have seen it, yes, added to the archive table. So now if I pull up Allison Swims with Gators, server level, she no longer has sysadmin. I know, so sad. Okay, let's take a few minutes. I'm going to show you the sprox, but we're not going to go in depth into that because this isn't like really a T-SQL writing session. But if you have questions, feel free to ask me, or questions afterward, you can ask me. But I thought I'd show you how I set those up. Yes? Does someone? Okay. The applied temporary permissions. We'll go through that one first. I have quite a bit of debugging in here because I needed it when I was writing these. So I love doing store procedures with a comment block that also has the execute statement in there inside the comment block. And I've told my students this. This is why. When I first learned how to write a store procedure, Kathy Kellenberger was always so good at always highlighting exactly what she wanted to run. And Ryan, my other mentor, was really good at starting a new window every time. And I tend to be a lazy developer. And so I would write my store procedure, and then I would put at the bottom of that window, execute so that I could, test it out. Well, if that execute blah, blah, blah gets into your it will then get into your store procedure and totally mess things up. So when I started working at my company and I saw that putting that execute statement inside the comment block, I thought it was brilliant. I still think it's brilliant. And so anyway, so in here, comment block, and the comment block doesn't matter where it's at, but I have the debug. So what the debug just shows you what it would do if you were actually going to run it. It's inside a transaction. The reason I have it inside a transaction is I wanted to get through the whole table or not. I don't want it to apply 2 of the 3, have an error, and then I have to go back in and figure out what applied and what didn't. Okay, so that's why I have it wrapped inside a transaction, and everything is just set up pretty simple. If exists, select from if it is active is true, but is applied as false. That's why I have those bit, fields in there. And then if that is true, if there's something there, then keep on. If there's nothing in there fits that, then we don't need to do anything else, which is why this is a really lightweight. It doesn't take much to run. So then I have a cursor. I don't normally recommend cursors, but in this instance, it works really well because it will go through each line and there's not going to be a lot of them. So you're not really slowing down your performance. Okay, so then I have goes in each line. Is there a login? And this goes back to it'll create, let's see. Create login if doesn't exist. If it's Windows, and here it has the create login if it's a Windows, and create user if it doesn't exist, apply server permissions if it's a role, apply server permissions if secureable is on the server, apply database permissions if it's a role. So I tried to comment it so that each section you can look at and see what it does and see if you need to update it for your own use. I actually comment things like that when I'm writing my code because it helps me. It kind of feels like an outline of the code, makes it super easy to read. Apply database permissions if secureable, but not a schema. Apply database permissions if a schema. That's why I have the field in there. Is this a schema? Because you have to set up your statements differently for that. And then if update is applied equals true. And the debug, etc. There we go. Okay, here I have, I'll show you that later, actually. I was looking for, I knew they had that if the is SQL user, because I don't want to create a login for a SQL authenticated user through an automatic process, because I want to make sure it has a password, etc. You might set yours up differently. Okay, notify permissions to delete. This is how I set it up. Again, I have my comment block with the execute statement, have the debugging. I set up very similarly. It's going to go through my table, and this is where I have the 5 days. So I'm going forward 5 days. You can easily update that. Probably ought to put a comment in there. If you don't want to annoy your developers as much as I do, then you might want to set it for 2 or 3 days. But I like to give them a little bit. A lot of times the developers that have put in the ticket need to go back to the business user and whatever. So sometimes they may need a few days to figure out if they need those permissions extended. So I like to give them that opportunity. Here I have where it says the email, the HTML style so that the email looks easily read. Yes.
Oh. Basic process. Where in your job you're just calling
No.
servers.
That's actually a good question. I currently have it set up just as a process that runs on each server. And then I have a view on one so that I can look at the archive tables all together. But I don't have it set up on one server that will reach to other servers.
You don't have.
Oh, we do have link servers. But not through here. I wouldn't do any kind of temporary permissions in that way. Okay, so that's just making the email look pretty. And then you'll see in here, I love this info, you all, because I am often, like if I'm troubleshooting, I don't want to send it out to the actual requesters. So I just comment out the recipient's one and then uncomment my personal email. Obviously at work, I have my work email set in there, unlike a great server. But it makes it obvious where to change it if you are troubleshooting. So I left that in for you all because I do have it there. Okay, so that's the Sprock that I have to notify that sends out that email. Delete temp permissions. This one is very similar to the apply temp permissions. You know, I have the debug section, it's in a transaction, it's pulling the if exists is active true and is applied true. So it's only going to evaluate if both is active and is applied if they're both true. Otherwise, forget any kind of work. I have the delete set to run once an hour to pull up those the time ones. Again, it's very light touch, so it hasn't been an issue in any way. Originally I had it set to run once a day. If you aren't going to make use of times, you could definitely just have it run once a day. And then it automatically goes through and deletes and archives. The job runs both sprocs. Let's see. Again, just like the apply, it's in a cursor. And each section I have commented out so that you can see what is going on in that section. I'm going to talk about that troubleshooting in here in a minute. So it's just building the statements and using dynamic SQL, the if exists, then, create this. Alter server role, blah, blah, drop member, blah, blah. So it's creating the statements. Just like in the apply one. Delete server permissions if secureable, but not a schema. Delete database permissions if schema, because again, we have to build or concatenate those statements differently. And then at the end, it's going to update the is active flag to false. So it's deleting the permissions and then is active false. And then the next sproc that gets run in that job is the archive one. And again, just like before, this one, you could see some ways I've kind of played around with that. Here, it's going to have the delete from permissions. It's inserting, sorry. First thing it's going to do is insert from my permissions table into the archive table. And then it's going to delete that row from the temporary permissions table. And I have some error handling in there. And it's inside a transaction for the same reason I said before. So like if you look at the job, you can see there's actually two steps. It deletes and then it archives. It deletes the permissions and then it archives out of that table. Okay, so let's do a little bit of error handling. I'll show you, I've alluded to that so far already. This time I'm going to insert into my temporary permissions table. I'm going to give Thunder Falcon, try to give Thunder Falcon some permissions. So let's go ahead and do such a thing. So put it into the table, but now I'm going to try applying it. And Thunder Falcon is a SQL authenticated user, but there's no login for Thunder Falcon. He didn't rate. I can show you that. So if you look at the server logins, you can see there's no Thunder Falcon there. So now I'm going to try to apply it. And it comes back and says, SQL login needs to be created manually because I put that statement into that into the error handling in the sproc. Okay, so now I'm going to clean that up because honestly, every time, so at my work, like I said, I had to apply permissions go every 5 minutes. So if you make a mistake and it barks at you, it will continue every 5 minutes. So then you either like disable the job until you get it fixed or whatever you need to do. But at least this time there's a nice error message in there. So I am going to delete Thunder Falcon. I would honestly, in the work, if this were a real user that needed permissions, I would then create that login manually because it's SQL authenticated, but we are not today. We are going to. Yeah, correct. That is how I do it. That's a good point. You might want to, then it's more like logging all the mistakes. So, but you could if you wanted to. It never got anything granted to it. Okay, so that is one air handling, the SQL authenticated. And then the other one, we had this come up where sometimes somebody would leave the company and we would delete their user and everywhere and forget to think to look in the temporary permissions tables. And so then the delete will fail. So let me show you how this works. So this time I am going to give Katie archives medieval history. I'm going to give her data writer. Oh, never do that. Into in the post-it replacement. So now if I go up to post-it replacement, you can see, oh, I thought it went in there. Oh, because I didn't apply the job yet. Now, if I go in here, you should find Katie archives medieval history. I just think it's really cool that my coworker has a PhD in medieval history and now she's a DBA. I just think it's awesome. So, Katie archives medieval history. She has her permissions, which were, what did I say? Data writer. So if we look in here, look in the membership, data writer on the whole database, would never do that. Now, because she maybe left the company, hope not, I am going to drop her. And now, then I'm going to update so that her permissions are expired. And you can see coming up next where if I delete, it shouldn't have deleted. Oh, that's because I put it wasn't deleting. It would error out. However, when I did the delete sprock, I had it look for that. I think I closed out already. Let me open it back up. I'll show you what I did. To get this happened several times, and it took me a while to figure out why it was causing problems. And I put in the comment, here it is, check for missing user. And if the user is not there, not that user isn't there, then I am updating the table to have the is active equals 0. And then the rest of it will work just fine. So that was some troubleshooting that I did based on this happened to me several times and I didn't like spending the time trying to troubleshoot and figure it out. So I just updated the Spark. Okay. in the table. So the user didn't have permissions, user was gone, but they were still in the table. And this happened to me multiple times because when we have somebody leave the company, they get their stuff is gone, it's deleted, but I didn't have a process then to also check all the temporary permissions tables. And because we do have in test and everything, not just prod. So this took care of that problem. Mhm. It archives it. It will then archive it. Because I had that in the delete and then that job first deletes and then archives. And so then it works. But it will still be archived, yes. Okay. And I'm done. If you have questions, here we go. Contact information, email is a good way to contact me. There's the GitHub and all of the Sprox tables, all of it's in there. I am still on Twitter. I still am scrolling at 2 okay, probably not 2 a.m., but you know, way too late or way too early. Um, I have Mastodon and Blue Sky, but I never check those, so I would not try to contact me that way. Um, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a really good way to contact me because I do check it regularly because I like watching my students get jobs. I find that really fun. And so I am on LinkedIn. That's another way to get a hold of me. Also, feel free to connect up. If you do, just make sure you like send me a message and say, "Oh, I was at the SQL user group." Because otherwise I don't connect up with everybody who, you know, messages me or unless you message me. So questions, questions about database security in general. Yes.
If you have someone that's like, grant them a temporary position, like you said, you send them an email,
Mm-hmm.
then you just keep extending it. Like at what point are you just like,
That's actually a good question. So we've kind of thought, I will push back if need be. Usually they don't, because we've been doing this for several years. Most of the time, our developers and our what I call IT adjacent, so like those business analysts that work closely with IT and whatever the department that they work with, they're pretty used to it, so they don't really keep trying to do that. And if they did, then I would just take it up.
so when they put in a ticket and be like, I need this for 2 weeks,
Mhm.
do you just go, okay, or do you like go?
It depends.
Is there a fact?
It not normally a back and forth, but there can be. And sometimes they'll check indefinitely because the way our change management is set up, I tried to make it as easy as possible for people to put in a date. You know, like this, when do you want I have it default to when do you want the permissions to expire? But then we do have a section where they can check that indefinitely because a lot of permissions are needed to be indefinite. And, but we will push back on that. If it's an individual or if I don't think it's needed, I, I do push back. But, you know, again, database security or security in general is always weighing the risks versus people being able to do their jobs. And so my goal, my theory and my goal is to find a win-win. So how can I help you do your job in the safest way possible, following our best practices? And so sometimes that takes a little bit of, you know, um, it gets harder if they want those permissions like for 6 months or something like that. Then unless it's a really good reason, I don't like doing it. Yes. Mhm. 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 Yep. Yeah. Mhm.
And I can say approve.
Right.
2 months and then we want their progress.
And I will, because, because it sends out that email and then they have to come back to us. They are more willing to do it on a shorter term than they would otherwise. And so, they know they can have it, get it extended and, you know, if it's an obvious ending to a project, it's easier to know when that time should be. Like we have done some for 6 months or whatever because that project isn't over. I know they're gonna need it, but it's harder when it's like, and honestly, the developers are really good about like if it's needed for 2 weeks and then they come back, can you extend it for another week? You know, they really are good about that. But again, that's probably because I've pushed back quite often for several years. For quite a few years now. Oh gosh, no. Um, so that's what um should probably talk about that sometime. I have a process that looks for the audits. And so if a DBA grants a database wide permission, then it will pop up as an alert for us. And we know that just because it can be a legitimate reason. But, we don't want it to accidentally get through.
You know,
It depends. Um, Data reader, we do have. Um, we don't do data writer in prod, but I will in test. But we're trying to get test permissions to mimic prod as much as we can. So we are unlikely to give that even in test, but we might give it on specific tables or schemas so that they can do their testing adequately.
I do think database, and create the DB owner, trying to get it down the level. But then a lot of times it's all automated. There's scripts where it creates the database, it creates jobs, it creates all this stuff. So we do grant the sysadmin really short term
Mhm.
where we have that change ticket and
Mhm.
we'll put the change ticket into a testing mode so that the ticket doesn't go away. So put in the comments that this was granted on this day and we wait and
Okay,
have reminders come up so that, hey, are you done? Are you done? So that we can take it away. Or the other alternative, like I said, is sometimes we'll create the database for them and grant them to the owner until they're all done with their stuff.
yeah, so it depends for me. It depends if it's a live, not live, or prod, not prod is what I call it. So like when we're setting up it's a prod server, but it's not live yet, then we will do those temporary permissions work beautifully in that case because they may need permissions that they won't need once it's live. So I do differentiate. I don't know if we have that written down as difference, but it is definitely a difference. Um, it's the only time trying to think, even there, when I say like more, it's still not a lot, even in prod, not prod. And so that's where,
Take extra snapshots, take extra database backups. usually the server admin or somebody is there
Mhm.
babysitting.
Yeah.
The activity.
Yeah, so we'll do, and that's where I said the infrastructure, like sometimes they need sysadmin. It's only that one team that nobody else. And we're usually, if not on with them, but very much aware and working with them on it. Sometimes when somebody needs an upgrade and there's a big ticket and, you've got multiple teams involved, I will be there, or one of the DBAs will be there. For that reason. But those are pretty unusual circumstances. So, but that's where that why I did the hours and not just days like I had it originally. Yes.
So you
Mhm.
think about that.
Yeah.
Whenever, you are running on these permits, more so on test, that mean in prod, when a new object is required. You guys, as DBAs create it and then still the group goes through the, service tickets to make sure that
Yes.
you get access to.
So, depending on the team that putting it in, they can be really good about thinking it through ahead of time. So they might have, like, if there's new objects that are created in prod, they know that certain service count will need permissions on that object, and they will put that in that same change ticket. So it's just multiple steps to first deploy, um, and then grant permissions. Some of them are not as good at doing that, and then they put in a task. We have our permissions through tasks instead of like a big change, and so it's faster to get it through, depending on approvals.
So I guess even after an object is created for the, alter table,
Mhm.
still it's the DBAs. So,
Yes. Yep. So in my head, every time there's a permission granted, it's the database owner needs to approve and the DBA. And so while the DBA may not have a line item on the ticket, the change management ticket, we're doing it. And so that is our approval. We also do like any deployments to any of the databases. We're the ones that we also approve. So
so when you say approve, are you actually only approving or are you actually doing object creation?
we object create also. I mean, we run the pipeline or whatever. Yeah. So that all goes through us. So it's easier to, yeah, to have an idea. Like, again, some of the teams are really good about, we need these permissions also, step 2. And then if I forget, they will chat me very quickly. Did you grant the permissions I asked in the change? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. So, yeah. No, we don't lock ViewDef down too much. We give ViewDef pretty liberally. Um, to be honest, we have clones of most of our databases, except for some of the clones are more locked down. If they have, most of our information is not like people's individual information. It's financial data. And it's, technically public. It's just how we have it. So, but developers can put clones on so they have the ability to see what's in there. We do currently. Yeah, I love having the clones though. It's more steps for the developers, but they love having it because it's just more. Yeah, they can play. So there are other ways you could do clones, but we do use the red gate. Yes.
Can I ask earlier, you said something about having alert set up on your stuff, you accidentally are gonna give
Mhm.
database wide permissions, is that just another job that you're running? Or procedures, or is that like more involved than that to set up?
Honestly, don't remember exactly which alerting. We have multiple alerting
Gotcha.
methods that we use. It's a signed store procedure, which I talked about last spring. I don't remember if you were there or not. That's getting pretty in the weeds. I'm pretty excited about signing Sprox, but and that's because to be able to see those audit files takes a very high level of almost sysadmin. And I don't want things to have sysadmin just to view an audit log. And so that's why I signed those Sprox. But in SQL Server 2022, they have a new permission to be able to view audit logs. Yes. So, but that is how I have some stored procedures that I've written to pull the audit logs for specific things that will alert us. And I can't remember if it's a job, and I can't look it up. So, yeah. Other questions? You know, I could talk all day, so. It is. Okay. Thank you. Hopefully think database security is a little bit sexy. Just saying, gotta go there. And you'll be like, okay, Sharon, you can make it not too hard to do all this. So I find it, if you're going to have it on a temporary basis, it's been, I looked for third-party products that would do that, and we couldn't find any. So if you know of something that will do it very granularly and temporary, I would love to know. So there we go.